This is an Audio Wool original.
This episode of Frightday is brought to you by Spring-Heeled Jack Coffee. You need great coffee. Jack delivers. Visit springhieldjack.coffee.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you'd like to support us, go to patreon.com/frightday. I have honestly been getting so many compliments on my GIMP mask with it unzipped when I walk around town.
Don't even say
People seem to like it a lot.
It is Frightday. My name's Byron, and the sun is sinking below the watery horizon, briefly appearing full, half rippling before finishing its descent, settling out of sight beneath this flat earth of ours, leaving darkness and a humid chill behind. The kind where you could go for a sweatshirt, but it might be too much. As we sit here in lawn chairs on the dock of a wealthy friend's old family lake house, disregarding the palpable sense that something awful happened here many years ago, now's as good a time as any to read your submitted factually freaky stories.
Yes!
In True Tales of Terror, volume, can't remember, where are we? What volume was it?
73?
Not even close. I'll pass this flashlight to Sam, who is here, so he can pass it to our purveyor of terror and MC for tonight, Kelly.
Yeah, careful. The batteries, I think, are leaking out of there, so just you might want to hold it over your...
Very old, very corrosive.
So,
what do we got in store today? What are we looking forward to?
well, we have a listener-submitted EVP. I think it's the first time we've had one of those, isn't it, B?
Well, actually, I believe very early on, not sure if it's a true tale of terror, but one of our listeners, Rosa, sent us an EVP from the Queen Mary.
Oh, that's right. I don't think it was for True Tales.
It might have just been
But
a regular
I do remember
episode.
that.
Yeah, it's been a very long time, though, and I'm looking forward to that one.
Maybe she could send us some baked goods instead of...
Yeah, she makes really delicious things. Yeah, like I've got a super long one.
I like how you were selling it. I have a super long story.
Okay, it is scary.
Well,
Damn it.
Pause and go pee before you listen.
Okay, asshole. So, Byron, you're actually going to really like one of these. One of the stories we have wouldn't necessarily qualify as a true tale of terror in Kelly's universe.
Okay.
I think
all
it
right.
falls into your range of interests. It deals with the satanic panic.
All about the satanic pee.
I kind of figured you'd be happy about that one. Yeah, we've got a cool story from a bartender. We've got a really spooky West Virginia one, which is funny because I was just listening to Country Roads this evening on repeat, and it made me think of West Virginia, and then I pulled up this story and I was like, oh, it's a sign.
Mr. Sunshine on his fucking shoulder, John Denver.
John Denver was full of shit. Remember?
Everybody loves that
Yeah.
song though, don't they?
It's a fun
From
song.
Super Troopers.
And mine was
That song.
from Dumb and Dumber.
Mine was from Logan Lucky.
Okay. Well, lower the lights and let's all right.
Spooky July, which is not an anti-Semitic statement.
Of course.
Ooh. Hi, Byron and Captain Kelly, and sometimes Sam. I'm John from Phoenix. Before I get to the story, here's a quick and pointless intro. I discovered Frightday on Dark Matter, but now I download the episodes for the drive home from work. I also just made the decision to join on Patreon to pick up the extra content, but more importantly, to contribute to something I genuinely enjoy. Addendum to my pointless intro. Kelly, your liberal perspective is informative and entertaining, and I enjoy when all of you speak your minds. On the conservative spectrum, I'm Mike Pence gave the commencement speech at my Master of Divinity graduation conservative. People need to lighten up. You be you.
That actually has to be one of the nicest things that anyone's ever said.
Yeah, to Kelly, ever.
Thanks a lot, John. Here's the story. Real names so I don't get confused, but no last names for my friends, so it's anonymous enough. I don't know what happened to us. I have my own theory, which I'll share at the end, but I want to give you strictly the facts as it happened so you can make up your mind. This was in West Virginia. Can you play just a clip of that song, Byron?
What the
insert
country?
just a clip.
Country
Country
Road?
Roads.
Right.
West Virginia, Mountain Mama.
Okay, sure.
Okay. This was in West Virginia during the summer of 2001. My friends and I were 19 to 20 years old, which is interesting because that's like a year older than I was then. And it was the third summer in a row that we went on our annual camping trip. That year, 6 of us went to a place called Cranberry Glades for a 3-night stay. It was a 3.5-hour drive south of Morgantown into possibly one of the greatest expanses of nowhere left on the east side of the country. Seriously, Google Map Cranberry Glades, West Virginia. Sam, get on that so we can have a perspective.
Use our cell phones, of course.
The last half hour of that drive was on a twisty dirt road through the woods that ended abruptly at a locked trail gate with a no vehicles sign. We parked both cars in the weeds off to the side, loaded our camping gear onto our backs, and hopped the gate. The trail was wide and covered with gravel like it used to have train tracks on it, and it followed a large stream that wound through a valley, so it was an easy walk. After maybe 2.5 hours, right at the 7-mile marker, the stream turned away from the trail. We left the trail and followed the stream. A short time later, we found a perfect round clearing about 15 yards from the water that fit all of us comfortably. After clearing the ground, we arranged our 5 tents in a circle. Sam, how barren is this place? Is it in the middle of nowhere? It's in the middle
Cranberry
of nowhere.
Glades, also known simply as the Glades, are a cluster of 5 small boreal-type bogs
Love a
in
boreal
southwestern
bog.
Pocahontas County, West Virginia.
I love a bog. I also love
This area,
Pocahontas.
high in the Allegheny Mountains at about 3,400 feet, is protected as the Cranberry Glades Botanical Area, part of the Monongahela National Forest. It's the site of the headwaters of the Cranberry River, a popular trout stream, and is adjacent to the nearly 50,000-acre Cranberry Wilderness. So, I mean, without reading too much more Wikipedia, it seems like it's a pretty remote, protected place.
Okay, so whatever. I think that it's important that it's remote, Sam. After clearing the ground, we arranged our 5 tents in a circle. Starting at the 12 o'clock position was a tent shared by Hillary and her boyfriend, Aaron, followed by my best friend, Aaron's tent. I considered changing names to make it more clear, but I promised I'd stick to the absolute facts, so bear with me. So we've got 2 Aarons.
I have to say that they're couples in tents on a camping trip. So far, this story is better than all of your other stories.
Why is that?
Because that's how scary stories start.
Is that how scary stories start?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's how unwanted pregnancies
They
start,
should.
but is that how scary stories
I
start?
mean, they should. It was in the 80s. I'd like it to be again in the 2020 whatever.
All right, well, here we go. Hillary and her boyfriend, Aaron. Then we've got solo Aaron. Okay. Then Chris's hilariously small one-man tent with its back to
Chris
the
is the
water.
wild card,
followed
right?
by my tent. I
gotta
think
be.
so. I don't know.
He's out there just muttering to himself and getting stoned on shake, comically oversized joints.
Side note, the author, our wonderful listener John, is correctly using apostrophes and possessives and plurals, and it's really making me happy.
Ooh, MVP.
Yep. Then Chris's hilariously small one-man tent with its back to the water, followed by my tent, and lastly, Owen's tent finished the circle. We started building a fire pit in the center. Okay, so hold on. Does this mean that there's one girlfriend there? Doesn't that mean that the one girlfriend's like spoiling things?
No,
Well, no, I mean,
come on
she's
now.
gonna survive.
Well, Kelly, why are you assuming that the guy isn't the fifth wheel here? What if the guys are friends with the girl and she brought her boyfriend along?
Yeah, what if we get to see him topless bathing in the lake by moonlight?
Fair point. Fair point. All right, moving right along. We started building a fire pit in the center out of large rocks from the stream bank. My friend Aaron and I carried over a huge flat rock to use as the base for the fire pit. And when we heaved it into the camp,
Leave no trace, Aaron.
everything vibrated. The tent shook, the smaller trees around us shook, and I could feel the vibration coming up through my legs. We started tossing this massive rock around to repeat it because we thought it was so strange. It had to be tossed with a decent amount of height to trigger the effect, and none of us could replicate it with our own body weight. Put a pin in that. I love put a pin in it.
It's like that doll I have that looks like you.
We spent the day shoving each other into the stream, having contests to kick over dead trees and chop up for firewood, and basically being loud, obnoxious teenagers. When it got dark, we started telling spooky stories around the fire. I decided it would be awesome spooky fun to go for a nighttime walk. My buddy Aaron was up for it, but the others weren't. The two of us headed out towards the trail and were gone for
Aaron
maybe
was a wild
30
card.
minutes.
Aaron's
No,
the
you said
best.
Chris. You said Chris was the wild card.
I don't know
You're
if
full
I
of
did.
shit. The trail was just wide enough that the trees didn't completely cover it, and the moon was full, which lit up the white gravel surprisingly well. As long as we stayed on the trail, we were able to walk just fine with our flashlights off. When we came back without any broken bones, Hillary and her boyfriend said they wanted to go back out with us. Instead of going with them, I stayed behind at the camp with Chris and Owen, and we made something to eat while Hillary and the two Aarons took off into the dark. this time in the opposite direction from the trail. They also decided it would be spookier if they left the flashlights behind and only brought a single electric lantern. Bad idea. A significant amount of time passed and they hadn't come back. This was probably an hour, but we weren't seriously worried, so no one was keeping track. It was enough time that the three of us at camp were talking about the three of them out there and wondering where they were. This was at 10 p.m., the first time I checked my watch. 30 minutes later, we were genuinely worried that maybe their lantern died or someone was hurt. I had left camp in the same direction they left and started yelling for Aaron. One name covered 2/3 of the missing group, and... Are you laughing?
Me? No.
Oh, no, it's birds in the background. Okay, sorry.
We're just out on this dock. Of course there's going to be gulls flapping around.
Those aren't gulls. That's like a weird twerpy bird.
Can you pretend that they're gulls? We're trying to make them think we're
vultures. Can we say they're vultures? Isn't that spooky?
You think there's vultures at night on a lake's dock?
I mean, aren't vultures everywhere?
All right.
After a few minutes, I went back to camp and told Chris and Owen I couldn't find them. I repeated this 2 more times over the following hour, going out further each time and yelling for Aaron. It was now 11:30 p.m. and our friends were still missing. I went out a final time and stretched the distance as far as I felt safe. The campfire was barely visible as a tiny yellow spot through the trees. It felt further than I had gone during the day and made me anxious. After yelling several times, I was about to head back when I spotted a little white light further out in the distance. I was immediately relieved and thought they must be lost. There was a decision to make, though. If I went towards their light, I'd lose the campfire. But if I did it quickly enough, I might get to them without losing my bearing, and then I could lead them straight back. I couldn't just leave them wandering around out there, so I took off towards the lantern. They were moving diagonally away and to my right. I followed quickly and shouted after them, but no one was answering, and the light, which was moving at a decent pace, was not slowing down. At some point, I checked behind myself and saw that the campfire was long gone. I was scared and sped up, hoping for the safety of finding my friends. Eventually, I made it close enough that I could hear their footsteps, but I still couldn't see anyone around the light. I called out that now isn't the time to try and scare me. When I made it within 50 feet or so, close enough that the light and the sounds of movement were very, very clear, the light blinked out, and the crunching walking sounds stopped. I killed my light and crouched down and waited. There was no way they could move without my hearing it. It was the most horrifying deer-in-the-woods state of awareness I've ever felt in my life. With my flashlight on, I slowly moved towards the last place I saw the lantern light and kept waiting to hear movement. There was absolutely nothing. When I arrived at my best estimation of where the light had gone out, I still hadn't heard any movement and there was no sign that anyone had been there. It was mostly heavy brush in every direction, and there was no exposed ground from foot movement or broken, bent, or pinned low branches. I immediately felt baited, and I started running back towards camp as fast as I could. The campfire wasn't coming back into view, and I was starting to panic. I turned off my light again and crouched down to listen and reorient myself, but under the trees, it was that pure black kind of dark. I don't know how long I was lost. I don't recall checking my watch, but at some point I recognized the distant white noise of the stream. I turned 90 degrees from my probably incorrect path towards the camp and headed for the stream instead. There was no stream bank when I found it, just a drop off into the water, but the stream was wide, so the moonlight lit up the surface and that felt safer. I jumped in and waded thigh deep against the current. There was no possible way I could be lost here, and eventually the campfire poked through the trees around a bend and the bank flattened out. I ran for home, soaked and all scratched up. Chris and Owen were freaking out and asked what had happened to me. I told them about seeing what I thought was the lantern light, that I followed it until it vanished, and that I came back in the stream because I got lost. As I was telling them all this, our 3 missing friends with their swinging lantern came into view from the trail side, opposite the direction they left and the direction I was looking for them. I said, "Do you think you're funny?" They started laughing, and my friend Aaron accused me. "We saw you trying to scare us." I immediately felt relieved, but asked, "Why didn't you stop? I was out there yelling for you, but you wouldn't stop." All 3 of them said they didn't hear me yelling, but they could see me following them, trying to be creepy with my flashlight off. I told them my light was on, but I was getting more confused and asked how they could see me if my light was off. They told me after they left camp, they turned towards the trail because Aaron said it was bright when he and I walked there earlier. All 3 swore they had been on the trail the entire time and that they saw someone else behind them on the trail that they thought was me. Aaron explained what happened to him, Hillary, and her boyfriend in detail. The following is my best recounting of his description of events, corroborated by him as accurate to his memory. I've stayed in contact with Aaron, Chris, and Owen over the years online, and I asked them about this night to check my memory.
Well, what happened to Hillary?
Well, I don't know. Apparently that wasn't the one they were friends with. I told you she was spoiling the good time. Aaron said once they were on the gravel trail, they walked out further past the 7-mile marker. At some point near the beginning of their walk, they heard something in the brush behind them to the side of the trail. It continued moving at their pace, and after a few minutes, they started calling out, saying they knew it was me. I wasn't scaring them, and they wanted me to join them. A large shape climbed out of the brush and stood on the trail approximately 30 yards behind them. It was close enough to see the silhouette in the moonlight against the bright gravel. Aaron said they could even hear it walking on the rocks, but it was far enough they couldn't get a true idea of size. I'm 6'4", and Aaron said it looked larger than me, taller and heavier, but still just a black human shape. He said, I held the lantern up to get a better look, but that just made everything outside of us darker. They continued walking, and the figure followed them at the same distance. After about 30 to 40 minutes, they wanted to come back, but they were nervous about the huge person on the trail behind them. They slowed down, and the shape slowed down. Finally, they stopped, and it stopped. They sat down, and it sat down. They said they sat there for a long time with the lantern turned off so they could watch this thing closely. They yelled at it, called it John, and told it to stop being a creep and just come sit with them. By now, they were pretty scared and felt trapped. The two Aarons said they had had enough, and they were going to figure out this thing because they couldn't stay there all night. They stood up, and it stood up. They started walking towards it with the lantern off, and it stayed in place. They said as they got closer, the huge size of this thing became more apparent, and it suddenly ran off the side of the trail and tore through the woods, making tons of noise by snapping branches and stomping brush, and then it was quiet. They immediately ran back down the trail to get to camp. Now all 6 of us were afraid and no one was talking. We decided it was very late and we needed to get whatever sleep we were going to get, so we threw a bunch of extra wood on the fire to keep it bright and went to our tents. I zipped my screen door shut but left the solid flap a third of the way open. My intention was to be able to see anything that came into camp without making a zipper noise that would get my arms torn off. I drifted to sleep with my head by the tent door and my feet by the back wall, but later woke up freezing with a numb face, and I zipped the solid flap shut to keep myself warm. I have no idea if that was the best or worst thing I've done in my entire life. I woke up later to small sounds hitting my tent. I was on my back staring up at the ceiling with no idea what time it was, but it was still dark and my tent was well lit by our campfire. Someone was throwing small rocks one at a time. I could see them hitting the back wall. It stopped for a second, then a stick hit my tent and slid down, coming to rest propped up on my foot, which I discovered in that moment was pressing the wall outward. I panicked and held my breath. If I moved my foot, the stick would fall, and then whoever was throwing things at me would know that I knew. I was lying on my back, completely rigid, straining to look down at the dent in the fabric from this leaning 2-foot twig I accidentally caught. After a minute or so of silence, there was an intense, slow, stomping walk that shook the ground. That vibrating bedrock we were on felt like it was coming through the surface. This thing stomped a few steps, stopped for a very long minute, then a few more stomps and another stop. Then more stomps followed by a stop. My tent had this nylon mesh pocket that hung from the wall, and I had some snacks in it to keep them off the ground. I was focused on this pocket because it was swinging back and forth every time the stomping picked up again. This pattern continued until it stomped between my tent and the fire, completely eclipsing the light. I realized that it had been going to each of our tents, and the silence was when it was standing in front of them. There was no sound, no breathing or anything. There was no smell. The shadow across the tent was a solid wall and didn't reveal any movement to suggest this thing was looking around like an animal. It was an intense, motionless, gigantic presence inches away from the top of my head as I laid there. I looked up over my head to see out, but, oops or yay, I had shut the flap. I was so paralyzed with fear I was going numb, and I kept thinking that this stupid stick on my foot was going to fall over. After an eternity of this minute of horror, the thing stomped away and back into the woods between my tent and Owen's tent. I don't know how, maybe it was a crash after the adrenaline rush, but even though I don't remember it, I must have fallen asleep again because I was jolted awake later by screaming from the woods. It was dark, but the campfire was gone now, so it must have been a couple of hours. The screams came from the direction of the trail, and they were loud enough to make an echo, much louder than my best efforts earlier when I was looking for my friends. My first thought was that it sounded like a woman, but the longer I laid there listening, the more it sounded like a man in pain, right on the edge of crying. It was a tortured, wailing yell, and I'm getting goosebumps trying to describe it because I can still hear it in my head. The screaming continued nonstop for hours. A short time after it finally ended, I saw the light from the sun coming. The moment it was bright enough, I escaped my tent and searched the ground for prints. Nothing. No disturbed soil, not even a dent in the ground. It seemed impossible. There were small rocks on top of my tent and Owen's tent and more scattered on the ground, and the stick that had been leaning against my foot was still there on its side, but that was it. I got the fire started again and waited for everyone to wake up. The first person to come out of her tent was Hillary. Before I could say a word, she said, "That screaming was fucked up." I told her I listened to it all night, and she said she and Aaron did too, and that they had been awake ever since. Her boyfriend came out of the tent after her and said he didn't think we should be there anymore. I asked him about the stomping, and they both said they didn't wake up for that. Next was Owen, who by some miraculous gift claimed and still claims that he fell asleep and didn't wake up once. He's a famously deep sleeper. Later, when we were making breakfast, Aaron came out of his tent and said he didn't get any sleep until after the screaming stopped. He also said he didn't know anything about the stomping. The screaming was enough. Last to get up was Chris. When he got out of his tent, they asked if he heard the screaming, and I asked if he saw the thing that was in our camp. He was almost completely nonverbal. He shook his head as if to say no, but refused to answer out loud. He sat down and ate, but it was like he was in shock. His behavior seemed to have a stronger effect on us than the events themselves. Like, this isn't funny or scary anymore, this is real and we need to go. We all agreed the trip was over. We packed up, doused the fire, and headed back the trail. 2.5 hours later, we were at the cars driving home. Aaron, Owen, and I were talking about the previous night and sort of comparing notes again. One of us asked Chris a question, and he didn't answer. We had been in the car less than 5 minutes, and he was out cold with his head on the window. We had to shake him awake when we made it back to my house more than 3 hours later, and he still refused to talk to us. He just got in his car and left. He still won't talk about it other than simply acknowledging that the night happened, and it was very strange. So you're right, Chris was the wild card.
Nailed it.
Here are John's thoughts. I've told my immediate family and a couple close friends about this story over the years. They all say it must have been a bear. I'll tell you what I told them. It was absolutely not a bear. Strange details aside, the sheer size and force alone makes it impossible.
I've got a theory.
Hold on. Let me hear John's theory first. This is better. This would have been if a fighter jet broke the sound barrier over your house, and when you told a friend, they said, it must have been the garbage truck. There is no equivalent between what I experienced and any West Virginia bear. Bears don't carry lights. They don't follow people at night on their hind legs. They don't run away on their hind legs. They don't stomp on two legs with thousands of pounds of force.
Oh, man, those are some low-budget bears.
They don't have the intent or intelligence to spend measured periods of time in silence in front of each of 5 tents.
Maybe he just wasn't happy with how poorly they put out the campfire.
I mean, it could have been smoky. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it could have
Only
been.
you are going to be beat to death with my shovel if you don't put that fire out, city people.
Oh, we don't know that they're city people.
I don't. It was
West Virginia.
I'm just not
Okay,
funny.
stop. Speaking of West
They
Virginia,
certainly aren't throwing dozens of small rocks with precision. We all grew up in West Virginia and spent our lives camping, and though there are certainly some eerie animal screams, none of us recognize what we heard as an animal or ever momentarily confused it with any animal. Next, this is your theory, Byron. They ask me if I think it was crazy hillbillies. That's even more insane. See, jet fighter analogy. But at least it accounts for the light I followed. Lastly, they ask if it was Bigfoot or something. That night it didn't occur to me, but once I was home away from danger, it seemed like the obvious connection. I've struggled with this, though, because so much of what happened didn't make sense. At the time, I had never heard of a Bigfoot sighting with a light in the woods. A Bigfoot intentionally leading people astray, throwing rocks, following people while being observed or screaming. Now, since that time, this is almost a copy and paste patchwork of stories I've heard from callers on late night radio. Art Bell! However, a big sticking point for me is that everyone who shares their experience talks about an intense and horrible smell. I was inches away and smelled nothing, not even a faint animal smell. It's like it wasn't there. The closest I might ever get to an answer is in Patrick Harper's Demonic Reality. He explores our interpretation of reality and the other realities which are interacting with us. He discusses the Bigfoot phenomena almost as a modern fairy interaction, like a guardian of certain places. There were definitely trickster elements in what happened and no one was hurt. We separated ourselves, but within that self-inflicted action, I was led away, disoriented, and isolated from my group, while the other group was intentionally prevented from returning to camp. When it came into the border of our camp, it made a clear statement that we were in its home, not the other way around. And it said this to each of us individually. We were loud and disrespectful all day, and it was loud and disrespectful right back at us all night. And the screaming came from the direction of our only way out, as if to say, "You're here until this is over." Byron, if you would like to insert your theory before I read his last theory.
Well, this isn't airtight, what I'm about to say. Certainly.
Prepare to be shot.
This creature does usually reside more in the southwestern side of West Virginia. It's new to me. It's a sheep squatch. Also,
oh my God, you're a fucking idiot.
Also known as the White Thing. It's a woolly-haired cryptid that is in West Virginia, predominantly, again, in the southwestern region. But yeah, it's interesting because it's a quadruped about the size of a bear.
This is Kelly's rolling her eyes, but Jamie from the Pine Hill Haints, like, he has done a whole bunch of research on these. It's like they call it they call it the Old White Thing.
Are you
like
serious?
I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
they have a song called The Old White Thing.
Hear me howling at night like the old white thing. Howling at night like the old white thing. I'm calling when the moon has her reign.
So it's very interesting, though. Very startling. I'll do my best to describe it. All right.
Hey, Byron.
Yes.
You're probably going to be getting a call here in a little bit. And you got to talk quick because it's my only one.
Oh, no. Don't do it, Sam. Please don't. So long, pointed head similar to a dog, but it's got saber-like teeth. And a couple...
Those horns, though. Don't you think he would have seen those horns?
I don't know. Also, it's known to be pure white. That's why they call it.
It was just a tauntaun. I mean, it's not a big deal.
But this thing, reportedly, I mean, up to 8-9 feet tall
8 to 9
as well.
feet, I saw that.
So that's significant.
I don't know. We'll ask John. John, hopefully you're out there. I would love to hear if you think it was a sheep squatch. So this is John's last story.
But also, horns, like a ram for some reason. Don't know why.
Okay.
Because the devil!
Okay.
That was pretty good, actually.
Sure.
The multi-dimensional Bigfoot theory has made me roll my eyes for years.
The smell, too. It smells like sulfur. So if you didn't smell anything...
I would actually describe it as brimstone for these purposes.
Appreciate that.
Yay. The multi-dimensional Bigfoot theory has made me roll my eyes for years, but I'll be damned if Harper's more thorough evaluation doesn't make sense of what happened. It is what it is, and I can't change it. I can only report it. I strongly suspect Bigfoot isn't really Bigfoot at all. Not how we imagine it, anyway. We didn't encounter a Bigfoot because that's not how this thing presented itself to us. It could have left prints, but it didn't. It could have been visible at any time, but it only made itself known when no one could see it clearly. Just a couple hundred years ago, it would have been called a forest spirit, and no one would be trying to figure out its genus or collect hair samples, and my friends and I would probably be yelled at for upsetting it. I've also wondered if that specific spot, ringing silently like some big underground bell, was significant for a reason we didn't understand. Okay, that's pretty cool. I love underground things. I have firsthand knowledge that things outside of our normal reality exist, and that's a gift. To me, it's not a secondhand story that I have to make up my mind about. It's a personal experience. If you've read all of this and even a single question comes up, I'm happy to answer any and everything that comes to mind. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. Okay, so Byron and Sam, you guys are charged with coming up with some questions to ask because I think that this is an incredibly interesting story, and the detail is impressive. And also, to the best of my knowledge, this is the first story we've received where somebody has actually gone to the effort to reach out and corroborate his memory of the story.
Yeah, that is a first. Did we ever go over why there was an almost hollow sound underneath the earth?
No, that's what he's saying. He's like, maybe there's something interesting about that spot there.
In Montana, we have the ringing rocks up on the Continental Divide, which are, I mean, you can Google it. It's a real thing.
Why do they ring?
I don't know that they're actually sure, but you can pound on them, you strike them with I think it's either like something metal or another of those rocks.
We really need to take Creech and Puck up there. I feel like they'd have a blast.
It's not just like a
things.
local legend. Like you can, I don't know, like Atlas Obscura has an article about it. So that's all. Like it could be just some weird resonance like that.
Super interesting.
About this Bigfoot, are we assuming that Bigfoot is a spirit, or is he like quantum leaping through time?
I mean, who knows? As you are aware, and as the listeners are probably aware, the largest body of Bigfoot knowledge I have comes from like the evolutionary scientific standpoint, not the multidimensional or time leaping standpoint. But who knows?
I just think they're forest trolls.
I wish they were forest trolls.
You know, the simplest answer is most often
Probably correct.
Yeah.
Occam's razor. Thank you, John. Excellent story. Wonderfully written. Thank you for the grammar and punctuation.
This is apropos of not much, but I would have to say, like, if there is a Bigfoot and they're as intelligent as people think they are and as cagey and wily, you don't have to be like a super genius to not leave footprints if you're trying not to.
Yeah.
And Bigfoot is like a super wilderness genius. I don't
Sam,
think he would
you've
leave
made me
footprints.
so happy right now.
That's what it took.
That made me so happy.
12 years of futile effort, and that's what it took.
Here we go. Another creature feature. Zach. So my story takes place when I was around 19. That seems to be the golden time for sighting things.
And we
driving
also,
late at...
real quick, I don't
What?
mean, I forgot an entire element to these stories. 19 is an age of youthful freedom and new opportunities to experiment with recreational drugs. And
I was going to just say I was near my drunkest.
yeah, no one has talked about that in the last story. And are we about to hear a little bit about that now?
Well, I don't know. This guy he has a divinity degree, which means he may not have been a hard partier.
I was leaning on a tree or two. I couldn't really tell. Hunched over, throwing up a quart of Irish whiskey.
Yeah, no, I
And
don't.
A furry man in a hat with a gun came out of the woods and said, "I am a ranger."
I don't think that was John's vibe. So my story takes place when I was around 19 and driving late at night down the back roads of South Carolina. Growing up in small towns and being aware how animals react to cars and people in general, it spooked me when, as I'm making my way back home, I noticed a large animal caught in my headlights. It stood in a large field off the driver's side and, from what I could make of the outline, seemed very dog-like to me. It appeared to stand about 4 feet in height, but what really stuck with me was its intelligence, the way it looked back at me as I looked at it, and seemed to convey that it knew it was looking at a person in a car and it wasn't afraid.
And it had a rad flannel shirt, and he knew he was rad. And he was the Hairwolf.
I mean, it could be.
Legend of the Hairwolf.
What if this is a Hairwolf sighting?
Could
You
be.
never know.
Yeah.
It wasn't afraid, not at all. Part of me wanted to pull over and investigate, and the more rational part of me told me to move on, which I did. I don't want to say it was a werewolf that I saw, but that's the first thing that came to my mind. Anyway, that's my story. Thanks for taking the time to read this, if you do. And thanks again for the show and all of you awesome people. Keep sailing strong.
Oh, no.
Ugh, gross. I don't even think that's a nautical hail. Or those are my favorite though. Like dog thing, people, werewolf,
You do
weremen,
like the dog
werewomen,
stories, don't you?
Wear anything, skinwalkers. I
You
love
never
that.
hear about werewomen. You hear about a lady squatch once in a while, but you never hear about a werewoman. You
Well, I
ever
had
notice
this discussion with one of the kids when we were reading Jack and the Beanstalk. I had to explain that an Englishman, as far as I knew, covered both, male and female and everybody else in England, which doesn't seem very fair, but they got a whole empire to back it up. A lot of history there, so.
Well, yeah, okay.
There's a lot of these accounts, though, of people seeing something very briefly in the headlights on the side of the road. Yeah, I mean, who knows what they see? There's a wolf hopping over a fence.
I don't think that wolves really do that. One of my students now is really into wolves. I'll have to ask her and see if she's aware of
No, they
wolves
usually
doing
kind of
that.
slink around until they get to a car that's unlocked, and then they kind of stand up and try the handles.
Of
I
course.
saw the video of the bear doing that. It was the cutest goddamn thing. Oh, man, that was cute.
Yeah,
Okay.
When a
breaking
bear
and
does it,
entering.
it's cute, but when
Yeah.
that mentally ill hobo down the street tries it, it's not.
Yeah, I like bears. Don't pretend that you don't like bears more than humans. There's a bear on our porch last night.
One man's breaking and entering is another bear's. Oh, would you look at that?
Exactly. There's a bear eating pizza on our deck last night, and it was adorable.
Well,
I
Don't
just
leave
imagine
pizza
if
outside.
the children did anything that a raccoon does, it would be awful. But it's adorable when a raccoon does it.
No, they do lots of things that raccoons do. What are you talking
No,
about?
that's what I'm saying. They do the same things, but it's adorable when raccoons do it.
Oh, they're
Those
pretty
little
cute
hands.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Byron, this one is for you. And again, this isn't like spooky in the Kelly traditional sense, but it is interesting. It's very interesting, in fact. And this comes from a very loyal listener, a guy who has sent us some lovely things, and we really appreciate everything he does for the podcast. This is from Jeffrey. Here we go. Dear Kelly, Sam, and Mr. McKoy. I don't know why the hell you get a Mr., but whatever.
Did they at least spell it with a C?
No, they didn't. He spelled it right even. I know. I'm an old EMT RN in the state of Nebraska. Way back when I was just a young first-time EMT riding with our contracted ambulance service here in the state capital of Lincoln, back in February of 1989, I attended a training event at the city's Level 1 Trauma Center. At the time, it was named Lincoln General Hospital. This training was conducted by the Lincoln Police Department and Lancaster Sheriff's Office. The topics covered were all new information for me. We trained on local gang activity, names, gang signs, graffiti, known areas of control, rivalries, slang, and some other MOs. Next was satanic and non-satanic cults, signs, symbols, days, dates of importance, rituals, dress, and literature used by the cults. Oh my God, I freaked at this part because I am exactly the same age as the kids from the exact same years as the Stranger Things kids. So I had been playing D&D forever. Eek! Was I controlled by Satan? Well, I wasn't, but I never told anyone I worked with that I played.
That's exact. I mean,
That's what they would
I'm
say.
suspicious now.
Right. But I never told anyone I worked with that I played because I wanted to be cool and I hid my nerdiness. Always embrace your nerdiness, Jeffrey. Always. Okay, this is the weird part. The entire training was conducted by the police department, but at the very end, after questions and the police left, my boss told us all to stay. There was more. The police left and the sheriff's deputies, who had done none of the training to this point, closed the classroom doors and stood at the back as though guarding it. What we were told next didn't even register with me for many years after. We were asked by the sheriffs that if there were any calls involving children or teenagers or runaways, any accidents, possible abuse, sexual assault, or amnesia, to file our normal reports but make an extra copy for the sheriff, not the city police. Also, we were instructed if we were ever questioned or involved with one of these calls and the Nebraska State Patrol or any other state or federal office was involved in any way, we were to immediately and discreetly contact specific deputies through our managers. I don't know why. I didn't ask why. I just took the information and said okay. I probably thought at the time it was just a power jurisdiction thing. Well, nothing ever came of it for me. It was many years later I wondered if this unusual reporting training had anything to do with the Franklin pedophile investigation. I still play D&D. My Dark Lord and Father told me it's okay.
Yeah.
Sorry it's not super exciting. After 33 years in the nursing EMT world, this is, however, the strangest training I've ever had. Thanks for taking your valuable time to read this piece, Jeffrey.
Whoa. I mean, I don't know. Anytime you get like officials involved, like actually involved, and I 100% believe his recounting of that training, it gets scary for a lot of other reasons beyond whatever they're saying you should be scared about.
And Byron, didn't it turn out well, I guess we don't know for sure, but didn't it turn out that supposedly that whole thing was a hoax?
It was a hoax. And it's really interesting him mentioning these very specific people he was supposed to report to. I just showed you a document that was inside. I purchased.
I totally thought that was my junior chemistry notebook for a second, and then I had to read the.
I just handed Sam a very interesting document that was inside of a 2-cassette set that I purchased online from the 80s, actually, called Exposing Satanism and His Works Today. And inside it was a sheet of satanic symbols, which is pretty interesting.
Hold on, so the peace sign is the cross of Nero?
That was that was that 2-tape thing. That was one of Fenris from Dark Throne's side projects, I think, wasn't it?
And if you look over at that sample altar, there's someone doing the hang loose hands gesture.
Yeah, what the fuck is that?
Pretty great.
It's like a surfing altar.
In the bottom right corner, there's an anarchy sign, which is upside down for some
What's
reason.
the Vandals? Dude, that's the Vandals symbol.
That is actually the Vandals logo.
I love it.
A lot of this is very interesting, but it's also, I just think, misunderstood at that point. And also, if you'll remember back in our Satanic Panic episode, I talked about the author of a book called Michelle Remembers, which was eventually debunked and turned out it was completely made up. There was a guy named
It was
Lawrence.
all like implanted suggestions, wasn't it?
Yes.
From her treatment.
There's a gentleman named Lawrence Pasder who wrote the book, made up what Michelle remembered, implanted these memories, but also on the side, certain departments would hire him to come in and teach them about this stuff. So it's possible that these sheriff's deputies, parts of that department, were just experienced, quote unquote. They're the ones that were trained in how to deal with this, and they didn't trust the city. So
Hey, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail.
it's all junk. It's all garbage.
So there's no truth at the root of it.
No.
Any of it.
The Franklin child prostitution ring was a real thing, and it's horrific. It's one of those stories that I would never do for the show because it is just so disgusting, and no one wants to hear it.
Thank you, B. I really appreciate that.
This fold out of the symbols that I'm looking at right now, I'm not surprised at the perspective from which this was created that the Star of David would be a satanic symbol.
Yeah,
Right.
And
they do
also,
consider
it turns
that.
out a triangle and a circle. So Sesame Street has fallen under the influence of the Dark Lord, it seems like.
Probably Mr. Roger, too.
Oh, yeah. Rogers, I mean, he's been for
Won't
a while.
you be my basement neighbor?
Oh, God. Stam, don't do that.
Sample Walter. God, we got to get a
love it.
picture of that up. Is that a hand grenade in the upper right?
I'll make sure to include this in the show notes of this episode of Frightday.com.
We should definitely use those symbols as something having to do with Camp Frightday
Oh,
online.
absolutely.
Yeah.
More information coming soon. But yeah, I love it, especially as someone who was almost an EMT. That's an incredible.
I know. When I got that, I was like, oh, this one's all for B.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. We've been dealing with some really fun monsters. And now it's time for a classic ghost tale. This is from a listener named David. I've been bartending for about 8 years and in the service industry for over a decade. One particular bar had very weird experiences for me and coworkers. Now, the bar is an Indian and English-based bar with tons of pictures from leaders in the colonization of India. Ooh, that's bad vibes just to begin. All right. I'm sure you can figure out what those are, but it's also the name of the bar, so I don't want to say it because I no longer work there. All of the pictures were of deceased rulers, and it was somewhat uneasy closing the bar with all these faces staring at me, but I never thought much of it. After a few months, things started happening. Me and other coworkers saw a glass thrown off the shelf it was on. And no, it wasn't wet. It wasn't sliding off. Nothing.
It was just Seamus.
I was sitting
He
on
was deep in his cups.
I was sitting on the other side of the bar, cutting limes for prep and talking to the coworker, and I happened to look up and it went flying on the floor. Not just fell, but like pushed off. I saw a door lock by itself as I was trying to lock it, and I heard my name called at least 3 times from the kitchen area after I turned off the lights and was heading out the door. And it was clear as day. Also, I was playing around with my phone and telling one of the coworkers these stories. Found an app on the iTunes store that was an EVP app.
Oh, okay.
It would say random words for a little and then just stopped. Then it said the name of my coworker's
I had a cousin
brother.
who did that.
Who did what?
Everything you just described that the app does.
Said random words?
And then stopped.
Oh, I think that the ghost was saying random words. Then it said the name of my coworker's brother that had passed away a year prior. I immediately deleted the app. Here's the weird part. The bar next to us was basically a stairway that led directly underneath our bar. They had a Ouija board for a couple of months, and during those months was when all the weird things happened. And I may or may not have touched the board. Didn't play with it, but just curiously looked at it and read the instructions. After they got rid of it, nothing really happened. At least not while I work there. But I haven't talked to anyone that's there currently since the hours are so scarce with COVID. Anyway, I'm positive some weird stuff was going on, and it was creepy. You all are the best. Keep up the amazing work. Whoop!
Oh, you're the best. It seems like a
Proof
lot
of Ouija proof.
I mean, I don't know. Remember, don't get me started. The only Ouija experience I have, other than the one that's in my office.
Didn't you ship that shit off?
No. I had one that was a Ted Gagan
You got that out
Ouija
from underneath
board.
my floorboards?
Sam, we're
I didn't even see
talking.
that happen.
That was the Ouija board that caused your car crash. That
Yeah, no joke.
was accidentally sent
yeah.
to someone who it didn't belong to and came back to me. And it also was the one that triggered a bunch of wind in my apartment with no windows open. But
That happened to me with a finger once.
You're
all right.
such an idiot. Oh my God.
It seems like a lot of bars have a lot of spirits, but there's a lot of darkness in a bar too. So maybe it's something that
Many spirits.
alcohol reference, very nice. And the app that he's talking about, I don't believe it was an EVP meter so much as it was a spirit box, something that kind of runs through
random generated words or whatever. Yeah, I think you're right.
And I've never used any of those apps, but I
The
wouldn't
thing that
be.
kind of sounds like Joe Biden when it's going through.
Oh God! All right.
Well, no, actually, I think it was an EVP thing because the way that he described it, the ghost was saying all of these words. Like he was.
Remember, though, that's how the ghosts speak through you, is by you're scrolling
Yeah,
through
but
the
they
radio and the
also,
words
through
come out.
EVPs, like the one that you're going to play, Byron, for our last
little bit later
story.
here. Yeah, I think we need to do more of that, and we will. We've got some plans in the future to do some more on-location type segments, which have
Just
been...
nowhere around here. I really don't want any EVPs of anything close to my house.
We won't
okay?
do it in your house, for sure. I promise.
Or near.
Okay.
I mean, maybe at like the Lewis and Clark place
We'll
over
figure
yonder.
it out. Yeah.
Okay.
Great story.
Wasn't that cool? Isn't that cool? All right, so
This is a great crop of stories all around, I would say.
aren't they pretty good freaky summer stories? So our last story of the night is the only story we have with evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So this listener has been a longtime listener. He's actually a friend of Sam's, which is one of my favorite elements of this because now Sam can't naysay it since it's a friend.
Surely can. This isn't Taylor's first time on the show either. We actually did one of his stories over the course of 2 episodes of True Tales and Terror a while
Correct.
ago.
But this one has evidence. So, Byron, I'm going to read the story, and you get queued up to play our evidence, okay?
Absolutely. Ready when you are.
It's so cold. These are words that I know. I live in one of the coldest places in the world. In the winter, it's not uncommon for it to reach temperatures of -40 to -50 degrees Celsius. Somebody do that conversion for us. If only David Lynch were here, he could convert it quickety split. That's what he does every morning. A couple of winters ago, my city alone received 14 feet of snow. It usually starts in October and finishes around May, giving us a few scant months of blazing humidity before starting all over again. It's also what I feel when I tell this story. That kind of cold. 2 decades ago, I attended university and we were into some urban exploration. Often on the weekends, we would research abandoned places and head out looking for adventure. More often than not, we found it. Having been chased away by wild dogs, angry raccoons, people still living in these places, or even by our own imaginations. One of my biggest
We call
fears...
those apartment complexes.
Well, yeah.
I don't know that that's...
One of my biggest fears was finding a bear in one of those hidden away places. Cornered and startled. Hey, just so you know, if you need to find a bear, Taylor, just come to our porch. The last thing I wanted was to meet my end in a hidden away place being torn apart by an angry bear.
This isn't Chernobyl Diaries.
Nor is it Annihilation.
yeah.
Ah.
I beat you to it, Sam. One place we frequented regularly is an abandoned prison on the outskirts of town. It was a 20-minute drive away and then an hour walk through dense, unforgiving bush to get there. It was a pretty miserable hike. Ravenous mosquitoes and black flies in the summer, knee-high snow and blistering winds in the winter. I have no idea what I was thinking, but this place kept on drawing us back. I honestly lost count of how many times we visited it. I would never be able to do that. I remember the first time I went. We decided we were going to spend the night there. Man, he is crazy.
I love it.
It was a hot August night when we went. I finished my shift at the local call center back then, around 11 p.m. My friends picked me up, packed and ready to go. My brother and a few of our mutual friends had been there before, so we didn't need a map. By 11:30 p.m., we arrived at train tracks where the road ended and unpacked to make the rest of the trek on foot. About halfway through the hike, it began pouring rain and thunderstorming. We continued onwards, soaked and miserable, but at least the bugs had laid off during the downpour. I was regretting this decision by the end of the trek, and my wrinkled hands and feet pressed miserably into my pockets and shoes. Then I saw it silhouetted in the distance against a flash of lightning. It was a sprawling structure, 3 stories high, and at least twice the size of a high school. My heart jumped, and I knew exactly why I had come to this place.
Did you know my first high school I went to was actually originally supposed to be a prison?
Wait, what?
Yeah,
Big Sky was?
Big Sky High School, built as a prison, turned into a high school.
I didn't know
No
that.
kidding.
That
Yeah,
explains a lot.
That's why the windows are so high.
We explored it thoroughly that night, telling one another scary stories that we would make up from the graffiti we found in the place.
Probably a
We
bunch
left
of
around
symbols from this.
Yeah, we
sheet
should
of
send them the symbols
paper.
and see which ones were there.
Yeah.
We left around 6 in the morning the next day, making our way back through the eerie morning fog. Though we had scared each other, I reviewed the tapes that I had recorded that night, hoping for an EVP, but no such luck. It was a bust. That would not be the last time I visited the prison, though. Far from it. In fact, it would be the first of dozens of treks I made to the place. This story involves 2 of those trips, and quite frankly, the only paranormal activity I had experienced in the prison. Other people had stories, but as mentioned in my last submission, I am a skeptic and I rarely take other people's stories as the gospel.
And I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, you skeptics. I haven't experienced anything in that prison that couldn't be explained by my own anxiety or tricks of the light combined with my own heightened senses. This was one of my first expeditions into the prison. We went as a small group at night. My girlfriend was with me at the time, and she still is, and 2 of my friends, Jeff and Nora. As per usual, I brought my recording gear with me. It was
It's a
probably
great
November, if I
double date.
remember right. Yeah, it's important. And we were wearing coats, but there wasn't a ton of snow just yet. I do remember it crunching under our feet as we walked there. We had been exploring the sub-basement when I found something I hadn't noticed before, an access panel in the floor. The ladder was broken, but it went about 8 feet down to a dirt floor. Oh my God. Why would you... I wanted to see where it led, but we were pretty concerned that if the ladder was broke on the other side, we would be stuck down there. Or it would be more than a reasonable amount of effort to get ourselves out at any rate. Being the stubborn asshole that I am, I had Jeff hold onto my legs and lowered my upper body down into the inky blackness of the dark hole. The only kind of darkness you can get in a place like that. Immediately a smell hit me. I remember, which was weird given how cold it was. Usually the smell of earth and rotten wood and mold don't permeate as much in the winter months. The second thing I noticed was that it was colder in here than it was a few feet above me, at least by several degrees. I shone my flashlight down the tunnel and saw it stretched out about 15 feet and then made a sharp left turn. I wasn't about to crawl through mud and gunk to end up in another room, so I had Jeff pull me up. We continued our exploration for a few hours and made our way back, no worse for the wear. That night, I took the cassette tape I had been recording on and gave it a listen, fully expecting it to be like the other tapes. I probably wouldn't have noticed if it hadn't been around the end of the tape, but you could hear it quite clearly. You could hear me telling Jeff to hold my legs as I lowered myself down, and the 2 of us were talking. Nora was talking to Laura in the background softly. I was grunting, trying to get a clear idea of how far the tunnel went, and relaying the information to Jeff. And an entirely new voice insidiously wormed its way into the audio feed. It was the voice of an older person, and strained as if having trouble speaking. It started far away and very quickly got louder, as if it was shambling its way at a breakneck pace towards me as I shone the light on it. The worst part about the entire damn thing was what it was saying over and over again. It's so cold. It's so cold.
Okay.
It's so cold.
Sure.
And then it stopped as quickly as it started. I think I listened to the voice on the tape almost a dozen times before even calling Laura over. I then played it for her without telling her what I thought I was hearing. You could clearly pick up 4 voices, 2 male, 2 female, and then this other damned voice rushing towards the microphone. We were both terrified and vowed never to go back. Years passed and we broke that promise. We went back to the property again and again. This was pre the day where you could easily record audio to a computer. I had upgraded my recording devices since, a fancy new digital recorder from Radio Shack. You guys remember Radio Shack?
I do. I got so many well, they didn't call them dongles then, but adapters for adapters.
Yeah, splitters and the little thing that you could, it was like a fake cassette that you could plug into your
Love
tape
those.
player in your car, and it would like output it through the radio.
My Walkman with skip protection, 40-second skip protection. Plug that thing right
Which
into
is
my
funny,
tape
now we
deck.
just call that buffering.
Huh.
But it was Radio Shack was a big piece of shit, though. Everything they made was
Sure
garbage.
It was all garbage.
Yeah, and then Amazon killed them. Okay.
Remember the Tandy? That was Radio Shack.
The what?
With Tandy, personal computer.
Give your family the world with Tandy Sensation from Radio Shack, the amazing multimedia computer that gives you a CD-ROM library, 16 million colors, and digital stereo sound. With a multimedia encyclopedia, wide horizons will open before your eyes. And there's voicemail with text-to-speech technology. Even beginners can access the future with Tandy Sensation. Anything else is just a PC. From Radio Shack, your Christmas electronics store.
I don't remember.
Nobody remembers. That was even before me. Nobody remembers it, but it's just a footnote in history.
I remember the Commodore 64.
Sure, we got this new recorder though, huh?
Yep, my coworker Tyler was fascinated with the story and the place, and we quickly made plans to go and explore it. My friend Rod came with us, and
Can I say Rod's the wild card here? It seems
I think you're right. I feel like it is. Equipped with a rugged Jeep designed for rough terrain, he reckoned that he could drive us right up to the prison. That sounds way better than mosquitoes.
I reckon I can get you right up near that old who's gal.
That does not sound like a Canadian. As promised, the Jeep was up for the task. Rod maneuvered it carefully through the thick bush and along a foot trail, and we made it there in record time. We set to exploration right away, and I was gleefully showing Tyler all of the secret passageways in the prison. We snaked our way around the property, while Tyler took a ton of pictures. He was from down south and had never seen a place like that before. So Tyler could have had that voice, Sam, but I don't think it was Rod. Around the end of our trip, Tyler asked if I was up for checking where the access tunnel goes that I told him about in the story. I remember suddenly getting very anxious about it. I had avoided that area of the prison for a reason, and really had each time I had gone back. I thought about lying and telling him I didn't know exactly where it was, but then I saw how excited he was and pushed my fear down. Rod wasn't overly thrilled with the idea and decided he was going to let us do it, and he would go to the Jeep and grab some rope in case we got stuck down there. Good job,
You
Rod.
never know when you're going to need rope.
I also know that Rod had heard the previous EVP, and I wonder if maybe that had something to do with his decision. At any rate, I hadn't tested the integrity of the dirt floor in that access tunnel either, and I was a little worried it would disintegrate into muck if we stepped in it. So Rod went back to his Jeep, and Tyler and I went to the sub-basement. It was still light outside, but the sun was starting to sink, and I knew if we didn't leave soon, we would be navigating the Jeep in complete darkness, which wasn't something I particularly felt was safe. We went down the stairs, rounded through a storage area, and arrived at the tunnel. It was dry in the access tunnel as far as I could see, and Tyler, having nothing to fear, lowered himself in. Seeing that he was safely on solid ground, I did the same and began relaying the story of the last time I had been in this place. The access tunnel was rather chilly, but nothing stood out to me at the time that anything sinister lurked in these passages. I pressed onward, and it turns out that it led to an entrance in the back of the building. We rounded the building, made our way back to the vehicle where Rod was still looking for rope. He saw we were safe, and I pointed out that we should go before it got dark. We packed up safely back to the highway by the time nightfall hit. Returning home, I didn't even think to check my recorder. I fell fast asleep, putting the events of the evening to the back of my mind. The next morning, I poured myself a cup of coffee and downloaded the contents of the digital recorder onto my laptop, broke it up, and emailed it to Tyler, as he wanted to listen to it too. Laura worked mornings at Shoppers Drug Mart. That must be a Canadian thing. And I had the day to myself, so I put on my headphones and gave the tape a listen. As predicted, nothing out of the ordinary presented itself on the recording. I was getting pretty bored, so I kept it running in the background while I played some video games. I must have missed it because when Tyler called me excited, I had no idea what he was talking about. He walked me through to the part where we had scaled down into the access tunnel. I listened to it, but I still couldn't hear it. And he said, "Listen to it carefully. There are 3 voices there, not 2.
Again?
I gave it another go. The conversation broke down like this.
Okay, it's cool down maybe. Yeah, this part was always cold. That's where it's dangling down.
Did you hear that? I'll play that one more time for you.
Play it again.
Okay, it's cool down maybe. Yeah, this part was always cold. That's where it's dangling down.
Oh, God. Oh, God, that is spooky. Oh, God, that is spooky. First voice is Tyler saying, "Fuck, it's cold down here, eh?" This is how you know they're in Canada.
Very Canadian.
And then there's this muffled voice that says,
It is cold. It's always cold down here.
we hear our protagonist, Taylor, saying, "That's where I was dangling down." And you can hear it's definitely 3 distinct voices.
I mean, let's hear it one more time.
Okay, it's cool down maybe. Yeah, this part was always cold. That's where it's dangling down.
It
so
seems
spooky.
like the strangest thing is it seems like the voice is close but whispering, like
Yeah.
Not distant but loud.
yeah, like a very
like right in the mic. Yeah, I agree. I almost dropped my phone. That definitely wasn't my voice, and it absolutely wasn't Rod's voice. It was far too raspy and not the right pitch. It was also nothing like the other voice that I had heard on the previous EVP we had captured from that spot. It was also so clear that I had completely missed it. I thanked Tyler and immediately clipped the audio to make sure I had it so I didn't lose it like the previous EVP, safely storing it in my Gmail account so I could always search it. I have plenty of other recordings from the trips to Burwash stored on my computer, and I've reviewed them but have never found anything else on there. I haven't been back to the prison in 6 years. The last time I was there, the roof had started to sag, and a few places on the upper floors. I knew that it would be our last trip. It was just now far too dangerous to be traipsing around. I'm glad I have these memories recorded, as there were some pretty good times and some really funny things that happened while we were there. Like all true ghost stories, this one doesn't end with some sort of satisfying resolution or explanation. One thing that I can say, though, is that listening to this EVP every once in a while still makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I hope it has the same effect on you.
I mean, I wish I had something like that, like something I could believe in.
Well,
You can believe me. I tell you that it's all true.
Just if there was something significant I could believe in.
Well, there's always sheep squatch, Sam.
well, there's always the Montana prison ghost tour that we are planning on doing in the very near future, as long as the virus doesn't keep creeping up on it.
Yeah,
We
I
did
mean-
have to postpone our Joooooooo-ly visit, but that does not mean it's out of the cards for us.
Well, I think they're letting everybody out of the real prison now here. We could probably go do some EVPs there when it's empty.
Hey, that's a good idea.
I don't want to go to jail again.
Oh.
Taylor, this was a good one. Like, again, my favorite creepy skeptic. Taylor does a great job of just telling it like it is, stating the facts.
I feel like this might be our greatest episode of True Tales. 2 creatures, 2 ghosts, and a satanic panic for good measure.
I gotta say, I did have a great time, and if you want your story to be in the next edition of True Tales of Terror, why don't you send it over to kelly@frightday.com.
We just really enjoy your freely provided crowdsourced content.
Love them all.
Very much.
Glorious.
My cold Coca-Cola Classic that I was drinking by the lake has...
Full of bugs.
no, yeah, and it is getting chilly, so I guess we should probably head back to that house.
Yeah, you don't want to be out there on the end of the dock when the sun goes down. That's when I've already said too much.
Oh, right. Well, guys, thank you so
I
much
was going to
again.
sing an Arctic Monkeys song, but I guess
Please
I won't.
don't.
It's fine.
God. We'll be back next week with Relic. Jooooooooly continues as well.
Broadcasting through masks.
Oh, boy.
Sleep tight, everyone.
And really, thank you very much for all of these stories. I'm totally spooked out now, and
Yeah.
Sam's going to
thank
freak
you
me
guys
out in
for
the middle of
taking
the
the
night.
time.
I can guarantee you. And I'm also supposed to go camping this weekend, and now I'm really worried about going camping. So,
Until next Friday, I'm Byron.
I'm Kelly.
And I'm still Sam.
Stay scared. You've been listening to an Audio Wool original, produced by Byron McKoy, theme music provided by Cemeteries. For more programs like this, visit audiowool.co.